Sarah Carter had long suspected that something was wrong, but she never had concrete proof, until now. For months, she had suffered from unexplained illnesses, each episode following a meal or drink shared with her husband, Daniel Carter, and her sister-in-law, Vanessa Carter. The symptoms varied: stomach pain, dizziness, nausea, but they all had one thing in common. They happened when she was with them. At first she dismissed it as food poisoning or stress, but the pattern became too obvious to ignore. The breaking point came one morning at brunch. Sarah, Daniel, and Vanessa were gathered at Vanessa's home, sipping coffee and discussing work. Sarah was supposed to present a major proposal for a high-profile client later that week, a project Vanessa had been competing for at their rival firms. That morning, when Daniel stepped away for a moment, Sarah glimpsed an unfamiliar number. On his phone screen, a fleeting text notification that read, "It's done. She won't make the meeting." Her stomach clenched. Something was off. Then there was the coffee. Its scent was slightly different, carrying a faint metallic tang that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Pretending to take a sip, she discreetly studied Daniel and Vanessa. A quick, almost imperceptible glance between them confirmed her growing fears. They were expecting something to happen to her. Acting quickly, she set her cup down and made an excuse. "Oh, would you look at that? I need to make a quick call for work. Vanessa, would you mind if I use your study?" She kept her tone light, casual. As she walked past the table, she deliberately stumbled near Vanessa's place setting, reaching out as if to steady herself. In the confusion, she switched their coffee cups. "I'm so sorry," Sarah exclaimed, straightening up, feigning embarrassment. "I'm such a klutz sometimes." Vanessa waved off the apology with a tight smile. "Just try not to break anything in the study." Sarah nodded, her heart hammering as she hurried out. Now she had to wait. From the study doorway, she kept a careful eye on the dining room. Vanessa lifted the cup to her lips and took a sip. Sarah's stomach clenched with anxiety. She considered stopping her, warning her, but she needed the truth. She needed proof. It didn't take long. A minute later, Vanessa's hand trembled slightly as she set the cup down. Her face paled. "Daniel," she said, her voice shaking. "Something's wrong." Daniel looked up, his expression shifting from confusion to horror as he realized what had happened. He jumped up so quickly that his chair toppled over. "Vanessa, what's happening?" His voice was tight with panic. Vanessa tried to stand but stumbled, clutching the edge of the table. I don't feel right." Daniel rushed to her side, his face ashen. "That wasn't supposed to be your cup," he whispered. But in the silence of the room, his words carried clearly. Sarah stepped out of the study, her phone already recording. "What did you put in that coffee, Daniel?" His head snapped up. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Vanessa's body was shaking now, violent, tremors racking her frame. "Call an ambulance," she gasped, sliding to the floor. "Please, I can't." Sarah didn't hesitate. She dialed 911, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Yes, we need an ambulance at 1542 Maple Grove Drive. My sister-in-law appears to be having a severe reaction to something in her coffee. She's conscious but experiencing tremors." Vanessa locked eyes with Sarah, fear and realization flashing across her face. "Sarah," she gasped, her usual calculated demeanor replaced by panic. "You switched. You knew." "Ma'am, the ambulance is on its way," the dispatcher assured Sarah. Daniel was growing frantic beside Vanessa. "What's happening? That wasn't supposed to." He stopped himself too late. Vanessa, despite the pain, turned on him. "Shut up, Daniel," she hissed through gritted teeth. "This is all your fault. You said it would just make her sick enough to miss the board meeting next week. You promised it wouldn't be traced." Sarah's blood ran cold. "The board meeting," the one where she was supposed to present the biggest client proposal of her career, the same account Vanessa had been trying to land for months. It all clicked into place. The tea she drank last month, the breakfast 2 months ago, none of it was accidental. The tea, Sarah said slowly, her voice steady. That was supposed to keep me home during the Johnson contract presentation. Vanessa grimaced as she clutched her stomach, doubling over in pain. You weren't supposed to go. You kept showing up anyway. So we had to try something else. Daniel backed away from both of them. Vanessa, stop talking, he said desperately. You don't know what you're saying, Vanessa let out a bitter, pained laugh. I know exactly what I'm saying. We've been planning this for months, ever since Sarah started outperforming me at every client meeting. You were supposed to make sure she drank it today. The sound of sirens filled the air. Sarah kept her phone recording as the paramedics burst through the door. They rushed to Vanessa, assessing her condition. Sarah stepped aside, watching as they loaded her onto the stretcher. With one final tap, she sent the video to her private email, then forwarded it to her lawyer. Daniel stood frozen, his carefully constructed plan unraveling before his eyes. I'll ride with her to the hospital, Sarah told the paramedics, her voice firm. After all, I need to make sure my sister-in-law gets the proper treatment. She turned to Daniel, meeting his terrified gaze. And I'm sure the doctors will be very interested in knowing exactly what was in that coffee. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and muffled sirens, but Sarah Carter remained eerily calm. She sat beside Vanessa, who was strapped to the gurney, her face pale and drenched in sweat. The paramedics worked efficiently, checking her vitals and administering oxygen, but Sarah barely paid attention. Her mind was focused on one thing. The truth was finally coming out. By the time they reached the emergency room, Vanessa's condition had stabilized, though the tremors hadn't completely stopped. Doctors and nurses swarmed around her, their voices a flurry of medical terminology. Sarah stepped back, arms crossed, as Daniel rushed in behind them. His face was flushed, a mix of worry and fear, but Sarah saw through it. He wasn't afraid for Vanessa. He was afraid of what she might say. The emergency room buzzed with movement as Dr. Phillips, one of the attending physicians, approached Sarah. Mrs. Carter, she said, her voice calm but firm. The preliminary toxicology report shows elevated levels of an unknown substance in Vanessa's system. We'll need to run further tests. Sarah nodded. I understand, doctor. But you should also test me. I have reason to believe I've been exposed to similar substances over the past few months. Dr. Phillips's eyebrows furrowed. You suspect poisoning. I don't suspect, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. I know, and I have proof. She opened the recording she had taken at Vanessa's house and pressed play. The damning conversation between Vanessa and Daniel filled the room, their words dripping with intent. Several medical staff members paused to listen, their gazes flickering toward Vanessa's unconscious form. Dr. Phillips's expression darkened. This is serious, the doctor said, her voice low. I'll notify the authorities immediately. Sarah didn't have to wait long. Within the hour, Detective Laura Mendoza arrived at the hospital. A seasoned investigator with a no-nonsense demeanor, she was known for her expertise in domestic and financial crimes. She carried herself with an air of authority as she approached Sarah in the waiting area. Mrs. Carter, Detective Mendoza greeted, pulling out a small notepad. I've already spoken with hospital staff. I need to hear your side of things. Sarah recounted everything, her suspicions, the previous instances of sudden illness, the moment she switched the coffee cups, and the recorded conversation. The detective listened intently, her pen scratching across the notepad as she took detailed notes. When Sarah was finished, she reached into her purse and pulled out another phone. I also started carrying a backup phone, Sarah explained. I used it to record conversations whenever I was around them. I have several more recordings, ones where they discuss their plans, albeit in vague terms. Detective Mendoza took the device, scrolling through the saved audio files. She tapped on one and pressed play. Vanessa's voice came through first. "The Henderson account is worth millions, Daniel. We can't let Sarah ruin everything we've worked for." Daniel's response was equally chilling. "I've got something stronger. This time, she won't make it to the presentation." The detective exhaled sharply, locking eyes with Sarah. "This is more than sabotage. This is attempted murder." The weight of the words settled over Sarah like a lead blanket, but she refused to let it crush her. Instead, she nodded. "I need to press charges." Detective Mendoza didn't hesitate. "We'll need both of their phones, and a warrant for their home and office." She turned to one of the officers stationed near Vanessa's room. "Make sure she's under surveillance. She's not going anywhere until we get the toxicology results." At that moment, a commotion erupted down the hall. Sarah turned just in time to see Daniel arguing with the security guards. His voice was frantic, his expression a mixture of desperation and fear. "I need to speak with my wife," he shouted, trying to push past the officers. "Sarah, please! You don't understand. We were trying to protect you." Sarah walked toward him, her face unreadable. "Protect me?" she repeated. "By poisoning me?" Daniel flinched, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before her eyes. "You are working yourself to death, Sarah. Taking on too much, pushing yourself beyond your limits. Vanessa and I—" He hesitated, casting a quick glance at the officers before continuing, in a lower voice. "We just wanted you to slow down." Sarah let out a cold, humorless laugh. "So your solution was to poison me?" She shook her head, disgust tightening in her chest. "How long have you been doing this? Was it you who tampered with my food? At the Christmas party, too?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes. Behind him, through the glass window of Vanessa's hospital room, Sarah could see her sister-in-law awake now, her earlier bravado gone. Her face was a mask of fear and calculation, her mind undoubtedly racing for a way out, but there was no way out, not this time. Dr. Phillips reappeared then, holding a tablet in her hands. Her expression was grim. "Detective," she said, nodding toward Mendoza, "the toxicology report is in. We've identified several compounds in Vanessa's system, substances that don't occur naturally and aren't available to the general public." Detective Mendoza's expression hardened. "And where would someone even get something like this?" Dr. Phillips glanced at Sarah. "That's what we need to find." Sarah Carter sat in the sterile hospital waiting room, her fingers gripping the edges of her coat as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. Outside Vanessa Carter's hospital room, Detective Laura Mendoza was giving orders. Officers moving swiftly to secure the crime scene. Sarah had spent months feeling paranoid, second-guessing herself, wondering if she was imagining things. But the truth had come crashing down in the last few hours, undeniable and horrifying. Daniel and Yo. Vanessa had been poisoning her, slowly, systematically, with chilling precision. She glanced toward the glass window separating her from Vanessa. The once confident woman now lay motionless, her eyes wide and filled with the fear of someone whose carefully constructed web of lies had finally unraveled. The toxicology report had confirmed what Sarah had long suspected. Foreign compounds, likely stolen from a pharmaceutical company, had been introduced into her system over the past several months. Daniel and Vanessa had played doctor and scientist, testing different dosages on her, waiting to see the results. They had documented everything like it was a twisted experiment. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings Sarah had collected, the stolen chemical compounds found in Daniel's office, and now the hospital's toxicology report. There was no denying what had happened. A sudden commotion down the hall drew Sarah's attention. Daniel was still outside, pacing in agitation, his expression shifting between desperation and denial. "Sarah, please!" he shouted, trying to push past the officers blocking him. "You have to believe me. It wasn't supposed to be like this." Detective Mendoza stepped forward, placing herself between Sarah and Daniel. "Mr. Carter, I strongly advise you to remain silent," she said sharply. "Everything you say can and will be used against you." But Daniel was beyond reasoning. He turned to Sarah, his face contorted with emotion. "Vanessa said it was just supposed to be a little bit. Just enough to make you take some time off. We never meant to—" "To what?" Sarah interrupted, her voice deceptively calm. "To kill me?" Daniel's mouth opened, then shut. His hesitation spoke louder than any words could. Sarah took a step closer, her eyes burning with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "Every time I got sick, every time I collapsed at work, you were there, watching, making notes. Was it fun for you? Did you and Vanessa sit together, analyzing how long it took before I started throwing up, before I passed out? Did you celebrate when I missed that big meeting?" Her voice shook. Sarah Carter stood firm, her pulse hammering in her ears as she locked eyes with Daniel. The weight of his betrayal pressed against her, but she refused to let it break her. Not now, not after everything. Detective Mendoza nodded to the officers, and before Daniel could utter another excuse, they grabbed his arms, securing handcuffs around his wrists. His panicked protests filled the air. "You don't understand. Vanessa orchestrated this. I only went along because I was scared of what she'd do," he pleaded, twisting to look at Sarah. "I love you, Sarah. I never wanted to hurt you." Sarah let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. "Love?" she echoed. "You poisoned me, Daniel. You watched me suffer time and time again. And now that you're caught, you're trying to blame Vanessa." She gestured toward the hospital room. "You were a team, and now you're trying to throw her under the bus?" Daniel's jaw tightened, desperation flashing in his eyes. "I didn't want to do this." His voice cracked, sweat beading on his forehead. "She convinced me. She said it was the only way, that if you kept pushing yourself, you'd ruin everything." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The level of manipulation, the sheer audacity, it was almost laughable. "You were supposed to be my husband," she said softly, "my partner, but instead of supporting me, you tried to destroy me." Detective Mendoza exchanged a look with her fellow officers before turning to Daniel. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." As they began escorting him away, Daniel's struggles grew more frantic. "Wait! You need to talk to Vanessa. She has records, proof that this wasn't all me. Sarah, please!" His voice cracked as they pulled him towards the exit. "Sarah!" But Sarah didn't flinch. She stood tall, watching as he disappeared down the hall, his fate sealed. With Daniel gone, she turned her attention back to Vanessa. Through the glass window, she could see her sister-in-law sitting up in bed, her hands clutching the blanket, as two officers stood at her bedside. Unlike Daniel, she wasn't screaming or fighting. She was calculating, no doubt trying to figure out her next move. Sarah took a deep breath, pushing the door open. Vanessa's gaze snapped to her, but her expression remained cool, unreadable. "So," Vanessa said, her voice hoarse but steady, "you finally figured it out." Sarah crossed her arms. "And you finally lost." Vanessa's lips curled into a humorless smile. "Did I?" She tilted her head, her sharp eyes scanning. "Sarah, you're alive. You won. But at what cost?" Sarah narrowed her eyes, refusing to let Vanessa's words seep into her mind. "You poisoned me. You manipulated my husband. You stole from the company. And now you're going to prison. That's the only cost that matters." Vanessa chuckled dryly. "You always were so black and white. You don't even realize what's happening, do you?" She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "You think this is over? The moment I step into that courtroom, The truth about your perfect little world will start unraveling. Sarah's stomach tightened, but she refused to show weakness. You're bluffing, am I? Vanessa's smirk widened. You have no idea how deep this goes. There are people who don't want me to talk. Powerful people. The moment they realize I'm a liability, they'll make sure I never get the chance to speak. She tapped a finger against her temple. But you'll still be standing. And guess what, dear sister-in-law? That makes you their new problem. Sarah's pulse quickened, but she masked her unease with a steely glare. Nice try, Vanessa. You're just grasping at straws. Vanessa sighed dramatically, leaning back against the pillows. Believe what you want, but when they come knocking, don't say I didn't warn you. Sarah clenched her fists, a storm brewing inside her. She had fought so hard to uncover the truth, to put an end to this nightmare. But as she stared at Vanessa, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not completely, and deep down, she knew Vanessa Carter always had one last move to play.